Good evening and welcome to Wednesday's 6-1.
The headlines this evening. No sign of resolution to County Clare migrant protest as the government says hundreds more beds are to come on stream within days.
We are hoping over the course of the next week to open to make available about an additional 350 beds in a number of centres.
Global warming. World Meteorological Organization warns the next 5 years are almost certain to be hotter than the last 5, with wetter summers in Northern Europe.
Phone and broadband company Air is fined almost €2.5 million for overcharging customers.
And going to the polls, tomorrow's local elections in Northern Ireland could be a referendum on the DUP's Stormont boycott.
The Minister for Integration has ruled out closing a hotel facility in Inch in County Clare, which is housing up to 30 asylum seekers. Roderick O'Gorman said it was unacceptable that the road leading to the McCullagh House Hotel was being blockaded. Some members of the local community are maintaining their opposition to how the facility is used.
Traffic cones and no entry signs block the rural road leading to a hotel in Inch in County Clare, where 29 male asylum seekers are housed since Monday. This is also the third day of protests by the local community, who are angry they were not consulted about the plan to use the McCullagh Hotel and 3 adjoining bungalows as a facility for men seeking international protection. They say the location is entirely unsuitable, with few facilities, and they want it closed. A video meeting between the Minister and Clare Oireachtas members earlier today failed to find grounds to persuade local people to end their opposition. In fact, the Minister ruled out the closure of the facility, so finding a solution is getting more and more difficult.
We have a multicultural society here. We've over 4,000 non-nationals or refugees, if you want, living here in the county. We have never had a problem. It's just this is the wrong place for this volume of men.
The government is due to announce a €50 million funding package tomorrow to improve facilities for communities who take in asylum seekers and refugees. However, those working with these groups say further opposition is fuelled by the lack of a government master plan and proper prior consultation.
The communications is pretty poor to the local residents. It's very poor to organisations like ours who only hear anecdotally about people moving in, and we don't get any official notification. So it doesn't allow us to prepare and to be ready to go out and do the kind of practical supports that we offer, you know, around leave to remain, applicants, work permits or whatever it is that the refugees might need.
Cathy Halloran, RTE News, Inch, County Clare.
As the fallout continues over the location of asylum seekers at a rural hotel in Clare, today opposition parties took aim at the government's overall policy on the issue, with accusations that communities were being left in the dark.
The manager of McCullagh House knew for 3 months that asylum seekers would be housed there, but nobody else was told.
Severe time constraints were to blame for such scenarios, according to the Junior Minister for Integration, but a tender has been put out by the government to help develop an improved communication strategy.
The problem is that the timeline between when the contract is agreed and when we get to share that information is quite tight, and when we actually have to move people in.
This controversy has risen to the top ranks of government, with the Taoiseach at a European Council summit in Iceland reiterating his call for a local blockade in County Clare to end.
People do want to know what's happening and they want certain assurances, and we have a responsibility to do that. But that doesn't mean that anyone can say that certain types of people can't live in their area. We can't tolerate that.
Meanwhile, back at home, the Integration Minister denied opposition descriptions of a cabinet at war over this issue, insisting that his department hasn't been left on its own as it seeks out further suitable accommodation.
I suppose the point that we discussed at Cabinet yesterday was that there's still 480 people unaccommodated right now, and as long as that's the case, you know, government collectively need to do more to address that element.
It's hoped that an additional 350 beds will be brought into use within the next week, but the shortage of supply is set to continue, and the standoff over the suitability of asylum seeker accommodation in Clare shows no signs of being resolved either. Tommy Meskel, RTE News.
We're joined now by our Midwest correspondent Cathy Halloran, who is in Inch, and our political correspondent Paul Cunningham at Leinster House. Cathy, it appears there's no sign of opposition there ending.
Yes, that's correct. In fact, attitudes, I feel, may be becoming more entrenched about this whole situation. Local people feel very let down. They say there's now a complete breakdown in trust among all the parties involved. Conflicting information they're being given about the numbers that are being housed here. And in fact, will those numbers increase in the future? That's the fear. For instance, last night they were told there are 20 occupants here. In fact, there's 29. So the only solution to the local community who are concerned about this is the closure of this facility. Now, Minister Roderick O'Gorman, as we heard earlier today, has ruled that out as an option. He is willing to consider meeting a local delegation, but it appears there's no common ground about finding a solution, which certainly looks unlikely in the short term. Now, just a short time before we came on air, the Bishop of Killaloe, Fintan Monaghan, arrived here at the facility. He met some of the local people and he also met some of the occupants of the hotel. He said he was here in a pastoral capacity because some of the men who are staying here, the asylum seekers, are Christian. He wanted to meet them, talk to them and offer them whatever pastoral care they needed, and invited them indeed to come to Mass in the local church. He also met local people. He says they have very legitimate concerns and he hopes those concerns are addressed. He didn't make a direct appeal for this to end, but he has hoped on all sides that a reasonable solution can be found fairly soon.
And Paul, as we saw in Tommy Meskel's report, Minister O'Gorman has been speaking to the media, and no real sense, I don't think, that there's any sign of a short-term or even a medium-term solution to the wider problem of the difficulties of housing asylum seekers.
I think you're right. I think Minister O'Gorman's press conference today was a case of steadying the political ship. There was no declaration, there was no date by which asylum seekers would no longer be sleeping rough. Indeed, we were left with the impression that that was something which was going to continue. That's despite Minister O'Gorman saying 350 additional places are going to be coming on stream by the end of next week to try and resolve the issue. So it is an ongoing problem. On the question of Inch, as Cathy just referenced, he did talk tough. He said that accommodation centre had to be used and he found it entirely unacceptable that the area was being blockaded. He was asked would he travel to Inch to talk directly with those affected, and he demurred, saying that he would talk to them in a video conference or they could meet him in his department. I think to a certain extent on that one, if he conceded on that point, then he was going to have to go to every single new accommodation centre that was going to be opened. On the question of tensions in Cabinet and some suggestions that there was infighting over the accommodation issue, Mr O'Gorman said that he was receiving support from his colleagues, but he added pointedly that everyone needed to do more, and that's because they need more places to try and assist the additional people who are coming in seeking asylum. And I thought it was rather interesting that he played on that several times. We need to do more. Collectively, we need to do more. And we know tonight that 3 new centres are going to be coming in, opening in Dublin, in Santry, in Clondalkin and in Dunleary, and no doubt there will be more centres opening right across the country.
OK, Paul and Cathy, thanks for those updates.
Still to come, 49 years after the Dublin and Monaghan bombings, the 34 people killed are remembered at a wreath laying in the capital.
In sports news, Manchester City prepare to take on Real Madrid in tonight's much-hyped Champions League semi-final. And Katie Taylor makes one fan's dreams come true as she joins her in the ring ahead of Saturday night's World Title Showdown in Dublin.
The World Meteorological Organization has said the world is likely to breach a key overheating temperature threshold for the first time in the coming years. More generally, the WMO says the next 5 years are set to be hotter than the previous 5, with more rain during the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere.
The devastation caused by extreme weather was plain to see in the Emilia-Romagna area of northern Italy today after half a year's rainfall fell in the space of just 36 hours. At least 8 people have died and thousands have been evacuated. The World Meteorological Organization said that people need to be prepared for more scenes like this because global temperatures are about to surge.
That there's going to be growing combined impact of higher temperatures and higher humidity, which are going to have negative impacts on human health and also how well human beings are able to work.
The WMO says we can be practically certain that at least one of the next 5 years will be the warmest year on record, and that temperatures in the next 5 years will be warmer than the past 5. What makes them so sure of a surge in global temperatures are very strong signs that late this year we will enter a positive El Nino climatic event, a naturally occurring warming pattern in the eastern tropical Pacific Ocean that drives up temperatures elsewhere in the world. Among the impacts, according to the report, is an increased chance of above-average summer rainfall in Northern Europe during that 5-year period, a region that includes Ireland.
We think that there's going to be more rainfall in Europe as well over the coming next few years. They're partly related to the North Atlantic heating up, and so there's more evaporation.
The report says there is a 66% likelihood that global temperatures will exceed the key 1.5 degree level of warming in at least one of the next 5 years. They don't think that it will be a permanent breach of the 1.5, but they say that we are getting closer. The WMO chief said today that even if we could turn off all greenhouse gas emissions in the morning, we could not reverse this warming trend until at least 2060. In the meantime, extreme weather events are becoming more extreme, and today's report says people need to be prepared. George Lee, RTE News.
And we'll have more on that later in the programme when we speak to Owen Moran, Ireland's permanent representative to the World Meteorological Organisation.
Phone and broadband provider Eir has been hit with a €2.45 million penalty by the communications regulator as part of a settlement following investigations into the overcharging of customers. Around 76,000 people could be due refunds totalling €6.7 million.
Following investigations into incorrect billing, Eir has been hit with a hefty bill of its own, a penalty of €2.45 million imposed by the communications regulator ComReg. It's part of a settlement that will also see Eir engaging in a process to identify overcharged customers and refund them.
76,000 customers are in scope for this review, and in the region of 6.7 million charges that have been applied need to be reviewed as part of the scope of this.
Could that mean 6.7 million in refunds?
In theory, that is what is in scope for refunds. When the review process is complete, time will tell whether that was the exact charges.
In its review of customer accounts, Eir will focus on people who were incorrectly charged due to an issue with a broken bundle on their account. For example, in cases where someone lost a discount because they changed a part of their package. There will also be a focus on customers who were incorrectly charged in cases where requests to cease a service were not processed, and customers who were incorrectly billed for early cease charges. ComReg has in the past secured convictions against Eir for overcharging. It had commenced follow-up investigations and had applied to the High Court for a restraining order to stop the overcharging breaches. In a statement, Eir said it apologised unreservedly to impacted customers and that where refunds are due, they will be issued as soon as possible. The company said it is carrying out a robust review of its billing practices, which will be overseen by an independent auditor. Brian O'Donovan, RTE News at Eir headquarters in Dublin.
Relatives of the victims of the Dublin and Monaghan bombings said they're concerned about legislation which would give an amnesty to those suspected of killings during the Troubles. The Legacy Bill is on course to pass into law in the UK. An event commemorating the 49th anniversary of the Dublin and Monaghan bombings took place in Dublin today. 34 people, including an unborn baby, were killed in the attacks. No one has ever been convicted in connection with the bombings.
It was one of the worst days of the Troubles. 3 no-warning car bombs exploded within minutes of each other during rush hour in Dublin city centre, and a 4th later that same evening in Monaghan. Dozens were killed, hundreds were injured. At a commemoration event today, all 34 of the victims' names were read aloud, and a minute's silence was held in their memory.
This is the 49th anniversary of the bombings, but for the families of the victims, the impact of that day continues to be felt.
I lost my uncle, John O'Brien, He was murdered alongside his wife, Anna O'Brien, and their 2 children. You know, events like this, it just tears families apart, you know, that you never recover, and it goes down through the generations.
You're just heartbroken for myself, for my family. I'm hoping by this time next year, John Boucher, the head of Operation Canova, he and his team are working tirelessly to get answers for us.
Former English Police Chief John Boucher is compiling a report investigating allegations of collusion between the Loyalist paramilitaries suspected of carrying out these bombings and security forces in Northern Ireland. That report and other future legal actions could be threatened by a legacy bill currently making its way through Westminster, which would offer amnesty to those suspected of killings during the Troubles.
We'd like to see it not being passed, and if it does become law, we hope that the Irish government will take a case to Europe.
The Taoiseach Micheál Martin said today that the government would continue to press the British government to pause the progress of the legacy bill and instead find a shared way forward. Joan O'Sullivan, RTE News.
RTE are investigating an assault on a teenager in County Meath, which was filmed and has been circulating on social media. Officers say a male youth was treated for serious facial injuries in hospital following the assault in Navan on Monday afternoon. They've appealed for anyone with information to contact them, and they're urging people not to share the video of the assault out of respect for the teenager.
Turkey has announced the extension of the Black Sea grain deal for 2 more months. The agreement, which had been due to expire tomorrow, was initially brokered to help tackle a global food crisis aggravated by Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. It comes as Kyiv told a top Chinese envoy that it would not accept any proposals to end the war with Russia that involved it losing territory.
The city of McCullagh has seen intense bombardment since the war in Ukraine began. Last night was no exception. Ukraine denied Moscow's assertion that a Russian Kinzhal missile had destroyed a Patriot missile defence system in overnight strikes on Kyiv, with Ukraine saying it had intercepted 6 of the Russian hypersonic weapons. Britain's defence minister met his German counterpart earlier ahead of a summit of G7 leaders later this week in Japan, where Ukraine and what support and weapons its allies might yet provide will also be top of the agenda.
Germany and Britain are at the forefront of Europe's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The systems that we have both put in place to help Ukraine maintain its momentum and defend itself are significant systems. They're not just symbolic. And I think that is the key, that Britain and Germany send the message to Russia that what they are doing is unacceptable and that they cannot win.
Some agreement has been found in the midst of the ongoing war, with Turkey announcing that the Black Sea grain deal, which had been due to expire tomorrow, will be renewed for 2 months. The United Nations and Turkey brokered the deal last year to tackle a global food crisis aggravated by Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, one of the world's leading grain exporters. But Kyiv warned this afternoon that Russia must stop using food as a weapon, as it welcomed a short-term solution in what looks likely to be a long-term war. Fiona Mitchell, RTE News.
The Taoiseach has signed a declaration that seeks to make the Kremlin accountable for its actions in Ukraine. The register of damages caused by Russia in Ukraine will record these acts after the initiative got the backing of more than 40 countries at a Council of Europe summit in Reykjavik.
There may have been fog on the horizon in Reykjavik today, but the views of the Council of Europe leaders who have gathered here could not be clearer when it comes to the war in Ukraine. They want Russia held accountable.
That means, first of all, that there is a legal recognition of the duty of Russia to pay damages.
The Taoiseach was one of more than 40 leaders who signed up to a register of the damages done by Russia in Ukraine, with a view to one day forcing financial reparations and bringing those responsible to justice.
There are 3 who still have to go through internal process, but I think it's only fair to say that this is a huge step in ensuring accountability and having tangible deliverables coming out of this summit.
It's very pragmatic and practical in the way that it is done regularly, clearly, with evidences. So it's very important.
The support for these measures is another concrete demonstration of the solidarity with Ukraine, and it also has the backing of Canada, the US and Japan. However, the Taoiseach said today that efforts will now have to be stepped up to boost support for Ukraine among Latin American and African countries. Micheál Lahan, RTE News, Reykjavik.
Northern Ireland goes to the polls tomorrow for local council elections. The results will be closely watched to see whether they influence moves to restore power sharing at Stormont.
800 candidates will contest 460 seats across 11 councils. At one level, this election is about very local issues: bin collections, burials, building control and planning. But big picture politics is also in play. Questions like, can Sinn Féin overtake the DUP to become the largest party of local government?
So the momentum's definitely behind them. They are running more candidates. They are growing in confidence throughout this campaign. Sinn Féin are very well placed to become the largest party of local government.
Support for the middle ground has grown in recent elections. Alliance is hoping to put on council seats.
If you can squeeze it a little bit closer, so we'll close all those gaps up.
Potentially leapfrogging the SDLP and Ulster Unionists to take third place. But much of the focus will be on the DUP, how it handles the challenge from hardline rivals the TUV, and whether the outcome influences its decision about resuming power sharing at Stormont.
I think if they get an endorsement for the position they've taken, they'll probably feel buoyed up by that. I think the key thing, and the DUP leader said this repeatedly, is he wants to see changes to the Windsor framework that restore Northern Ireland's place in the UK. So that is the key thing that seems to be what this will hang on.
On one hand, the local government elections have nothing to do with what happens here at Stormont. On the other hand, it has everything to do with it. If the DUP does badly, it seems unlikely that power sharing will be resumed. If they do OK, the conditions could well be created where they agree to go back in. But either way, no one's expecting any movement this side of the autumn. Conor Macaulay, RTE News, Stormont.
Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle say they were relentlessly pursued by paparazzi last night following an award ceremony in New York. The New York Police Department said that while numerous photographers made their transport arrangements challenging, there were no collisions, injuries or arrests. A warning that this report includes flashing images.
They arrived in a sturdy SUV with blacked out windows, apparently with a police escort and ample security. But the intense media interest in Prince Harry and his wife Meghan's appearance at a New York award ceremony was undeniable. Meghan was there with Harry and her mother to receive an award for her advocacy for girls and women. Though they departed the ceremony in the same black SUV, they were seen later that evening in the back of a yellow taxi cab. And it is in that cab that Prince Harry's spokesperson said they were relentlessly pursued in a near catastrophic car chase by a ring of highly aggressive paparazzi. The pursuit, his spokesperson said, lasted for more than 2 hours. Though he called the incident a bit reckless and irresponsible, the city's mayor threw some cold water on the statement.
I would find it hard to believe that there was a 2-hour high-speed chase. That would be, I find it hard to believe, but we will find out the exact duration of it. But if it's 10 minutes, a 10-minute chase is extremely dangerous in New York City.
The incident, nonetheless, has obvious echoes of the car chase that took his mother's life in 1997. And it will provide further fuel for Harry's long-standing anger at press intrusion. Edmund Heafy, RTE News.
With a warning from the WMO that global temperatures are to reach record levels in the next 5 years, we'll speak to Owen Moran, Director of Met Éireann and Ireland's permanent representative to the World Meteorological Organisation.
And After Hours funding is announced to help smaller museums and galleries hold nighttime events. Welcome back. The main news this evening. The Minister for Integration has ruled out closing a hotel facility in Inch in County Clare, which is housing up to 30 asylum seekers. Roderick O'Gorman said it was unacceptable that the road leading to the McCullagh House Hotel was being blockaded. Today is the third day of protest at the hotel. The World Meteorological Organization has said the world is likely to breach a key overheating temperature threshold for the first time in the coming years. The WMO says the next 5 years are set to be hotter than the previous 5, with more rain during the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere.
Well, staying with that story, we're joined now by Owen Moran, Director of Met Éireann, who is Ireland's permanent representative to the World Meteorological Organisation and also Chair of Europe's Weather Satellite Agency. Owen Moran, thanks indeed for joining us on the 6-1 this evening. Now, this rise, warming of the Earth, getting above the 1.5 degrees, is that inevitable?
Well, the WMO, the World Meteorological Organisation, which is the UN body for analysing and monitoring and predicting the future state of the weather and climate, has predicted that it is more than likely that the planet, the globe, will reach a temperature which will exceed the 1.5 degree threshold on a temporary basis. This is a spike. It's important to emphasise, though, that this is not a permanent state. This is a temporary initiative, a temporary effect that could happen over the next 5 years. It is also indicated, of course, that over the next 5 years, it is very likely that the global maximum temperature record will be exceeded also in that period of time.
And is that down to human behaviour? Is that down to naturally occurring weather events like the El Niño, or a combination of the two?
It's a combination of two things. So there's a natural oscillation of sea temperatures in the eastern tropical Pacific. And this is now oscillating from a cooler phase to a warmer phase. And as we move into that warmer phase, that will act as that will provide a global heating effect, which will combine with the global warming that's been produced as a result of anthropogenically emitted greenhouse gases. So that combination is going to produce a scenario where we're going to have these extreme global temperatures which are breaking records.
Now, you said there that we will hit the highest year on record in the next short-term period, the next 5 years or so. But that's not going to be uniform around the globe, is it? I mean, some areas experience greater warming than others.
That's right. So, I mean, the Earth system is a natural system, so it's not linear. So there will be more heating in the Arctic, for example. So the report identifies that there'll be 3 times more warming than the average warming that is actually projected around the globe. And this is consistent with the record temperatures that we saw last year in Europe. And of course, in Ireland, 2022 was the warmest temperature on record as well.
So what will all of this mean for Ireland then? Can we expect to see even hotter temperatures than we had last year?
Well, certainly. I mean, the trend in Ireland is consistent with the global trend. In actual fact, last year, as I mentioned, was the warmest year on record. And it's the 12th consecutive year which is the warmest year on record. In fact, this century, 21 out of the last 22 years has broken records, except for the big chill in 2010. And also we know that rainfall is now 7% more than it used to be in terms of our climate normals.
And that was one of the other warnings today from the WMO, was about rainfall, wasn't it? That wetter areas might get drier and drier areas might get wetter.
And as climate change proceeds, as we continue to emit greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we're going to be continuing to force this chaotic, dynamical system towards extremes. So we will see more droughts, more heat waves, more extreme flooding events. And the impacts on our supply systems, on agriculture, on migration, and the societal effects will become more evident, as we've seen in recent years.
Now, this can all sound quite scary to people, quite sort of a doomsday type scenario. Can it be reversed?
Well, certainly. Technical solutions exist. We do not need to be operating within a fossil fuel dependent economy. And there are plans now, as we know, nationally and internationally, to adapt to climate change, but also importantly to mitigate the emissions and to reduce them rapidly. Now, this is an essential activity. We're possibly facing a very dangerous juncture, and an urgent action is required in relation to reducing our greenhouse gases and the production of carbon into the atmosphere.
Practically, though, can that happen?
Practically, it will be a big challenge to do this. Time is running out. So action plans are in place. In Ireland, we have action plans in place, and internationally, those action plans are in place. Now they need to be implemented, and of course, they need to be accelerated. So this can be implemented. The technical solutions are available, and it's important that we start moving towards their implementation.
I mean, people often say, though, Ireland is a small country, and when you compare what happens here with some of the big industrial nations and how much they're contributing to emissions, what can you say to people that they can do in their own lives that will make a difference, or will it make any difference?
Well, I suppose historically, we have to acknowledge we're part of the Western world. We benefit from very developed economies, and we're developed because we have emitted so much greenhouse gases into the atmosphere historically. Other countries who are quite large emitters today don't have that history. But it's very clear that we all must work now. We all must act now. And maybe in the West, it's our job to actually demonstrate the technologies and the solutions that can be implemented in order to mitigate and to address this climate crisis.
OK, well, we'll leave it there for this evening. Owen Moran, Director of Met Éireann and Ireland's Permanent Representative to the WMO. Thanks for joining us.
Hundreds of thousands of jobs in Britain's car industry could be at risk because of post-Brexit trading arrangements, according to industry experts. It follows a statement from Stellantis, maker of Vauxhall, Peugeot and Fiat, that Britain can't keep pace with requirements for electric car batteries.
The Brexit dream gets another wake-up call. Car maker Stellantis says Britain is not ready to meet new regulations for electric batteries for export to Europe. This site in Northumberland was all that was left of Britain's plan for a massive electric car battery manufacturing plant. Called Britishvolt, it folded earlier this year. It is now lagging behind other countries like China, as well as the EU. Under the post-Brexit trade deal, 45% of the value of an electric vehicle will have to originate in the UK or the EU by next year. Unless it's able to manufacture batteries itself, Britain will have to buy from the EU or face 10% tariffs. It's widely believed these costs would be unsustainable for an industry that supports 800,000 jobs.
So unless there's a change to EU rules, and unless the UK steps up and actually comes up with an industrial policy to support battery making, I can't see a mass car industry surviving in the UK.
Meanwhile, Nigel Farage, one of Brexit's main architects, now says it's failed.
What I do think is we haven't actually benefited from Brexit economically when we could have done. I mean, what Brexit's proved, I'm afraid, is that our politicians are about as useless as the commissioners in Brussels were.
And the economic fallout from Brexit is set to continue. John Corain, RTE News, London.
A new government campaign has been launched today to fund museums and galleries to host special evening time events over the coming months. The campaign is part of a wider plan to develop the nighttime economy.
A night out in Ireland is traditionally dominated by pubs, restaurants and movies. But a new nationwide campaign hopes more cultural alternatives could soon be on the agenda. As part of new plans launched at the Little Museum of Dublin today, €1 million in government funds will be made available to museums and galleries to stay open into the evening and nighttime. The project follows last year's Nighttime Economy Support Scheme and hopes to encourage groups to organise exhibitions, live podcasts and poetry events to showcase Irish culture to a new audience.
We have over 80 museums and galleries across the country. So now we'll have opportunities to have like a poetry slam, to have an open mic night for our musicians, to historical talks after the traditional closing hours.
The campaign aims to help smaller museums and galleries to open later and hold special events, which may otherwise have been difficult to fund.
I think for museums right across the country, they have been hardly hit by the pandemic when they're rural and regional areas. So I think really what it allows them is to be able to be more explorative, to be able to be a little bit more playful.
As part of this initiative, what we hope to do is to host after-hours experiences here in the museum throughout the summer, in which people can come along after work, on a date or with friends or family.
Museums like the Little Museum of Dublin off Grafton Street act as a snapshot to some of the cultural changes to take place in Irish society in recent decades. And with late night openings now planned, it hopes to be part of the future changes to come. Fia Crokiona, RTE News.
Now, still to come this evening, architectural gem, a derelict courthouse in County Kilkenny becomes a new home for jewellery making and goldsmithing.
And in sport, we catch up with Katie Taylor ahead of her homecoming fight this weekend. And will Haaland's heroics help Manchester City overcome Real Madrid in tonight's Champions League semi-final?
Welcome back. The main news this evening. The Minister for Integration has ruled out closing a hotel facility in Inch in County Clare, which is housing up to 30 asylum seekers. Roderick O'Gorman said it was unacceptable that the road leading to the McCullagh House Hotel was being blocked, and said a further 350 beds were due to come on stream in the coming days.
The World Meteorological Organization has said the world is likely to breach a key overheating temperature threshold for the first time in the coming years. The WMO says the next 5 years are set to be hotter than the previous 5, with more rain during the summer months in the northern hemisphere.
A former courthouse in County Kilkenny has been given a new lease of life as part of the government's Rural Regeneration Project. The new home for the Design and Craft Council's jewellery making courses in Thomastown was officially opened today.
Now over 200 years old, Sessions House served for decades as the courthouse in Thomastown, but following its last sitting in 2005, it fell into disuse. Kilkenny County Council realised it was an unpolished gem and took over.
We started a partnership with the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland, who identified the future use, which is a jewellery school centre of excellence. So I suppose their input determined what was needed in the building. It needed some minor changes, but for the most part it's retained its own integrity and people recognise it as it was.
Jewellery and goldsmithing students are relocating from Kilkenny City to use the space, which was regenerated with €1.5 million of public funding.
So you have a world-leading centre for goldsmithing and jewellery here. A state-of-the-art facility with micro-setting, all kinds of facilities. We'll be accommodating about 18 students full-time here, and we've been very lucky to work with Atlantic Technological University. We'll be providing degree-level courses.
Among those welcoming the development is recent jewellery making graduate Melissa White.
The standard of what's here available in terms of tools and things is fantastic, and the students that get to come and study here will just be so lucky. I'm sure it'll attract attention internationally, and I'm sure people who are already within the industry themselves will come back.
The centre here will have very strong links to the trade, the jewellery trade in Ireland, and we will be running bespoke programmes specifically for the jewellery trade and industry. And look, we're going to be running courses for everybody.
Courses will start here in the coming months. Conor Kane, RTE News, Thomastown in County Kilkenny.
Now time for news of sport. Here's Yvonne.
Thanks very much, David. Good evening. Katie Taylor's promoter Eddie Hearn has played down security concerns ahead of her world title fight at Dublin's 3 Arena on Saturday night. Extra security staff have been flown in and an increased Garda presence is expected for the first professional boxing match in Dublin for 7 years.
Finally stepping into the ring on home soil, Katie Taylor received a hero's welcome at her pre-fight workout, putting on a show for her fans who've waited more than 7 years to see her box in Dublin.
Yeah, I'm just so grateful to be here, and as I said, a few days away from stepping in and actually making history. I have a chance to become a 2-weight undisputed champion. I think we could have picked an easier fight, but we chose to step up in weight and to pick Chantal Cameron, who's a fantastic champion, an undisputed champion, and this is one of the biggest fights in boxing right now.
Security is tight for what's the first professional fight here since the shooting at a boxing weigh-in at the Regency Hotel back in 2016.
A lot of that's drummed up through the media. I mean, we have our own security wherever we go.
And just to put it on, notice, the security here this week is much, much less, probably 5 times less than security we had last week in Guadalajara with Canelo Alvarez. So this is a massive event for Dublin and Ireland. So obviously, the authorities will want to make sure it goes smoothly. And in that respect, it's an iconic sporting event.
It was a day to remember for one huge Katie fan, 11-year-old Carly Burke, who was plucked from the crowd to box with her hero.
It was excellent, yeah. It was my whole world to be here today, and I got the day of school and everything to do it. It was really good.
So after 22 professional fights unbeaten on foreign shores, Katie Taylor's homecoming is finally here. Fans getting a chance to see her in the flesh, and the atmosphere is already building ahead of what's sure to be a night to remember on Saturday night. Paul O'Flynn, RTE News in Dundrum.
Champions League takes centre stage tonight, and the clash of 2 of the world's top teams, Manchester City and Real Madrid, in the semi-final second leg. Pep Guardiola's side will have home advantage for tonight's big game. The tie is finally poised at 1-1 from the first leg in Spain. City have yet to win the Champions League and remain in contention to land a treble this season. Inter Milan, of course, wait in the final on June 10th.
A huge opportunity, enjoy the moment. How fortunate we are incredibly lucky to be here. And it's in our hands, it depends on us. We don't have to do, I would say, something exceptional. It's just to do ourselves and win one game to reach the final. And we're going to give everything, we're going to do everything. I have an incredible feeling about the team.
The Republic of Ireland under-17s team kicked off their European Championship campaign this afternoon. Poland provided the opposition in today's group game in Hungary. Colin O'Brien's side took an early lead through Aika Orazi. That was in the 5th minute, but the Poles came back and they scored 5 unanswered goals to win by 5-1. Tonight's Leinster under-20 hurling final between Wexford and Offaly is a sellout. That's a 7:30 start in Carlow. Meanwhile, it's been confirmed by the Kildare Camogie board that they won't be entering a team into the Intermediate All-Ireland Champions this year. The board met with players last night following a standoff which began last week when the board withdrew the panel from the competition without any consultation process. Kildare Camogie say they're committed to an independent review of the game in the county, which will be overseen by the Ord Comhairle of the Camogie Association. British cyclist Conor McGoldrick, whose parents hail from Dublin, has won the first stage of the 2023 Ross Tailteann. Afterwards, he described the win as really special. The 5-day race will traverse the country. Today it started in Navan, County Meath and ended in Birr, County Offaly.
It's the most prestigious cycling event in Ireland and sees some of the top Irish and international cyclists take part. Over 5 days, cyclists compete for the coveted yellow jersey, covering 768 kilometres with 14 categorised climbs. This morning, final preparations were being made in Navan ahead of the first stage, a 154-kilometre race from the Royal County to the Faithful County. And it was a tight finish in Birr this afternoon. British cyclist Conor McGoldrick was the first to cross the line.
And right across the finish line is indeed Conor McGoldrick.
The first 2 hours were fast, lots of attacks going. Eventually a group of 20 of us got away and worked really well together. I went solo on the main climb of the day to go after the King of the Mountains jersey. Got joined by 2 of us on the descent, and we rode in quite well together, and I took the sprint for the win. It feels really special. I've got some. My parents are both from Dublin, so this is, despite being living in the UK my whole life, the RAS has actually been quite a big target, quite a special race to do, let alone wear the leader's jersey.
47.3 kilometres covered in the first hour, which is very, very fast, and that included some crashes along the way and all. So yeah, it's been a hard day. There's still groups of riders coming in now, so there's going to be riders coming in for quite some time.
Today's stage is now over and the attention switches to tomorrow. Cyclists will leave Birr tomorrow morning, travel through County Tipperary before crossing the Shannon into County Clare and arriving in Ennis tomorrow evening. Sinead Hussey, RTE News, Birr, County Offaly.
Well, there was an exciting sprint finish on stage 11 of the Giro d'Italia into Tortona today. Just 1 centimetre separated the winner, Pascal Ackermann, from Jonathan Milan, who had to make a brilliant comeback to remain in contention today. Mark Cavendish was third. Look at that. Geraint Thomas still holds the leader's pink jersey. Meanwhile, Ireland's Eddie Dunbar is up to 7th in general classification. Finally, news of a ban and a fine for Brentford forward Ivan Toney. He's been suspended from all football and football-related activity for 8 months by the English FA. Toney was charged for 262 alleged breaches of betting rules over a 4-year period and is now banned until January next year and has been fined £50,000. That is your sport for now, so it's back to Caitríona.
Thanks, Yvonne. Finally, the wreck of the ill-fated Titanic has been visualised in full for the first time using deep-sea mapping. The high-resolution images captured over a 6-week period last year reconstruct the entire wreck that lies at a depth of nearly 4,000 metres. Scientists involved in the project say they hope it will offer a fresh insight into exactly what happened to the liner, which struck an iceberg and sank on her maiden voyage in 1912.
And just before we go, returning to that story of the attack on the young teenager in Navan, video of which has been circulating on social media, the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has described it as horrifying. Mr Varadkar said he wanted to send out his solidarity to the young person who was harmed and injured.
Well, let's take a look at the main news again this evening. The Minister for Integration has ruled out closing a hotel facility in Inch in County Clare, which is housing up to 30 asylum seekers, and it's the subject of a protest by some members of the local community.
Roderick O'Gorman said it was unacceptable that the road leading to the McCullagh House Hotel was being blocked, and said a further 350 beds were due to be made available in the coming days.
And you can keep up to date with that story and plenty more on the RTE News app.
And that is the 6-1 News this Wednesday. From all the team, thanks for watching.
We'll see you again at the same time tomorrow, but until then, have a good evening and do take care.
Hello there. Well, it's been a dry day today with some good sunny spells at times too, but tomorrow we're going to see a little bit more cloud and perhaps a spell of rain too before the sunny spells return for us all on Friday. Now if we just take a look at the satellite picture out there at the moment, there's plenty of cloud over the country now, but it has been quite dry today, and all that dry weather has been down to this large area of high pressure here. That high pressure is slow moving. It'll be with us through tonight and into the first half of tomorrow as well. It's not until later on Thursday this cold front will move across the country, bring a bit more cloud and perhaps a spell of rain during the afternoon and evening. But then on Friday, high pressure again pushing back in across the country with plenty of fine and dry weather in store. Then on Saturday we've got a couple of fronts that will move closer towards the country, so we will see a bit more cloud and perhaps a spell of rain at times too, but there will be some good sunny spells in there too, and it'll be rather similar on Sunday. Now if we just take a look back at the radar for this evening, well, it's been quite dry across the country. There has been a lot of cloud around, but there's been some good sunny spells at times too. That's going to continue as we go through the evening hours as well, so quite a dry night in store. There'll just be a touch more cloud pushing in across the west as we go through the night. Temperatures overnight then around 4 to 9 degrees. As we start tomorrow morning, well, plenty of good sunny spells across the east of the country, but as we go through the afternoon, a spell of rain will move across, starting from the west initially, but there will be some good sunny spells later in the day in behind too. Temperatures then around 15 to 18 degrees on Thursday. As we look ahead to Friday, there'll just be a little bit more cloud and perhaps a touch of rain for northern parts of Ulster and Connacht, but elsewhere it'll stay quite fine and dry with plenty of good sunny spells for a time too. Temperatures then around 15 to 19 degrees. And as we look ahead towards our Saturday, well, a bit more cloud is going to push into those western and northwestern parts where we may see a touch of rain for a time too. But elsewhere, it should stay largely fine and dry with the best of the sunny weather really across the eastern parts of the country. Temperatures then on Saturday around 16 to 20 degrees. That's the forecast. Have a good evening.